The wind screamed across the mountains like a living beast, carried with its shards of ice that cut against Elias Carter's skin. His heavy boots crunched through the drifts, each step heavier than the last. The tall pines bent beneath the storm's force, their branches weighed down by thick snow. Elias tightened the wool scarf around his neck, though it did little to stop the biting chill. His cabin, warm and safe with its small stove, was still miles away. A man could die in this cold before he ever caught sight of his roof again. Elias was no stranger to the wild. Years of felling trees, dragging logs, and working through every kind of weather had hardened him. But this storm was different. The snow came down so fast it blinded him, and the cold seeped through his coat like needles of ice. His breath came in white clouds, turning to frost in his beard. He pushed forward, but the wilderness offered no mercy, only endless white. For the first time, Elias felt fear. Then, through the blur of snow, a shadow appeared on the mountainside. At first, he thought it was another boulder, but as he trudged closer, he realized it was an opening, a dark maw carved into the stone. Hope surged through him. Shelter. With quickened steps, he stumbled toward it, nearly collapsing at the mouth of the cave. Inside, the air was still warmer, shielded from the biting wind. He leaned against a rock, catching his breath, whispering a word of thanks under the roar of the storm. But before relief could settle into his bones, Elias noticed something impossible. The faint orange flicker of firelight danced against the walls deeper inside. His chest tightened. This was no empty cave. Someone was already here. He froze, his instincts screaming at him to turn back. Yet the storm outside clawed at the cave entrance, promising death if he left. Heart pounding. Elias stepped forward slowly, his boots scraping against the stone floor, the glow growing brighter with each step. Then she appeared. A figure stepped from the shadows, tall and unmoving, her bow drawn with steady hands. The firelight caught her face, sharp features framed by long black hair that flowed across her shoulders. Her dark eyes locked onto him with fierce intensity, the arrow's tip aimed directly at his chest. She wore the clothing of survival, deerskin stitched with care, beads strung at her neck, the markings of a people who knew the land better than he ever would. She was Apache, proud and unyielding. "This is my home." Her voice rang firm, carrying authority that left no room for argument. The storm's howl outside only made her words stronger, echoing in the stone chamber. Elias froze, his hands rising instinctively, palms open to show he carried no threat. His axe was strapped to his back, but he made no move toward it. His survival depended not on the weapon he carried, but on convincing her he meant no harm. His breath came hard, each word trembling in the icy air. "I just need shelter," Elias said, his voice steady but respectful. "No trouble, no harm, just the storm's passing." The bowstring remained tight, her eyes narrowing, weighing him. The silence between them stretched like a taut rope. For a moment, Elias wondered if she would release the arrow, ending his journey here and now. The fire crackled, throwing shadows that danced along the cave walls. The storm outside roared like an angry spirit, pressing them together in this unlikely meeting. Her gaze softened slightly, though the bow remained drawn. She studied him, the frost clinging to his beard, the exhaustion in his posture, the honest fear in his eyes. Slowly, almost reluctantly, she lowered the bow, though she did not put it away. "You may stay," she said, her tone guarded, "but only until the storm ends. Keep to that side. Do not cross my fire." She pointed with her chin toward the far wall, her command leaving no room for discussion. Elias nodded gratefully, lowering himself onto the cold stone where she directed. The fire's warmth reached him only faintly, but it was enough to keep the deadly chill from his bones. He leaned back against the rough wall, pulling his coat tighter. His heart still raced from the encounter, but slowly it steadied. Across the flames, the woman settled once more, watching him carefully as if expecting him to make a wrong move. Between them, the fire snapped and hissed, a fragile boundary neither dared to cross. The hours stretched on, silence filling the cave. Elias kept his eyes on the flames, stealing only brief glances at the woman who shared this refuge. Her movements were deliberate, every gesture carrying the confidence of someone who had survived alone in this wilderness far longer than he could imagine. She adjusted the wood in the fire, the sparks lifting into the darkness above. Elias thought of asking her name, but the sharp set of her jaw warned him to hold his tongue. Instead, he listened. To the storm outside, to the crackle of the fire, to the steady rhythm of her breath across the cave. Every sound seemed magnified, pressing into the silence. He wondered who she was beyond the bow and the guarded eyes. What life had driven her into this mountain cave, far from any settlement. Yet he dared not ask. For now, it was enough to be alive, to feel the warmth of the flames, to know he would not freeze before morning came. But even as he sat there, Elias felt the weight of her presence. This was no chance encounter. The land had thrown them together, two lives colliding in the middle of a storm. And though they sat apart, with fire and suspicion between them, something unspoken passed through the cave that night. Not trust, not yet, but recognition, quiet and undeniable, that survival had bound them in a way neither could escape. The storm raged on, but inside, an uneasy silence grew into something far more powerful. The storm did not let up. The wind hammered the mountains with a fury that seemed endless, trapping Elias and Apache inside the cave. At first, neither spoke, both wary of the other. The fire provided warmth, but also drew a line between them, each keeping to their own side. Yet as hours stretched into days, silence itself became a kind of language. Elias would glance across the flames, catching the flicker of her eyes before she turned away. Every crackle would seem louder in that tense quiet. Every heartbeat a reminder they were not alone. Eventually, necessity forced word between them. Apache asked if he hunted. Elias admitted he worked with axe and saw, not bow or rifle, though he had trap game when needed. She gave only short replies, her voice clipped, but even so, conversation became a thin thread tying them together. By the second night, he caught her studying him more openly, not as an intruder, but as a man trying to endure. He sensed her caution softening, like snow melting under firelight. It was on the third day, when the storm began to ease, that Apache finally spoke of her past. Her voice was low, almost reluctant, but once the words came, they carried the weight of memory. She told him of soldiers who had ridden into her valley, how they set fire to homes and cut down those who resisted. Her husband had fought bravely, but he fell defending their people. She had fled into the mountains, carrying only grief and what little she could salvage. Since then, this cave had been her refuge. Elias listened without interrupting. He leaned forward, his calloused hands clasped, eyes fixed on the fire, but his ears caught on every syllable. He knew better than to speak empty comforts. Instead, he offered silence, the kind that allowed her pain to breathe. In that silence, his own memories stirred, the wife he had buried years ago when sickness swept through the settlement. He had worked the land and cut trees to distract himself, but the nights were always heavy, filled with an ache that never faded. Her story mirrored his in ways he hadn't expected. When she finished, her gaze settled on him, waiting for judgment perhaps or dismissal. Instead, he nodded slowly, as though honoring the burden she carried. "I know something of loss," he said finally, his voice steady. "It doesn't fade. You just learn to carry it." His words were plain, but they reached her in a way eloquence never could. For the first time, she studied him without suspicion. In his eyes, she recognized a fellow survivor, scarred yet enduring. The fire between them no longer felt like a barrier. It felt like a bridge. By the time the storm cleared, the silence between them had changed. It was no longer cold and sharp, but softer, edged with understanding. Elias gathered his gear, strapping on his axe and adjusting his worn coat. The sun had broken through the clouds outside, its light spilling across the snow. He looked back at Apache, her figure framed by the flickering fire. "Thank you for sharing your fire," he said, his tone earnest. "I won't forget it." His words carried the weight of parting, though something in his chest resisted leaving. Apache remained seated, her eyes fixed on him, expression unreadable. The flames painted shadows across her face. For a moment, she said nothing, and Elias turned toward the cave's mouth. Then her voice broke the silence, softer than before. "Snow will return," she said. "Few survive alone out here. He stopped, the words sinking into him. It was not